And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network. Well, at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio on the Mighty Twitter, at Coalition_radio, the mothership, the original Coalition 1.0, 2.0, at coalitionradio.us. Well, let's dive right into it. Joining us live on the air as we speak is someone who is now one of the cornerstone players, the key players in the Coalition Radio's evolution, if you will, from our analog days now on to, well, the state-of-the-art bleeding-edge operation that we represent today in Rhode Island and national media. We got to know Connor Drigotas because of his writing. He is, as I like to say, a writer's writer, something that I admire because, well, I'm not, but I recognize it in other folks. I've always enjoyed his perspective on communications and messaging. He's one of those talents that actually, as I like to say, answers questions we didn't know we had. And in doing so, presents, I think, a fairly unique and honest, sometimes a brutally frank perception and analysis of the liberty movement and or its skills or lack thereof in all of the above. He can be found at ConnorDrigotas.com. He is, in fact, the only Connor Drigotas and in a .com and a person here in America, I believe. He also is an associate professor at Lehigh University in the business school. And now he has joined an organization that he's going to tell us all about tonight. It's Americans for Fair Treatment. Connor, welcome back to the Coalition. You are, as always, a welcome repeat offender here.
Happy Thursday. Thrilled to be here. Thanks.
You know, it's been several weeks since you've been here, and, well, not much has happened. Insurrections, continent drifts, who knows, 2 trillion, 3 trillion, 4 trillion, whatever. But, I think tonight what I'd like to do, if you'll humor me, is I really want to get an understanding of the organization you've joined, their mission, their perspective. It's particularly with a new administration at hand, an administration, I should say, that's going to be clearly more geared towards supporting big union. And that's, if you're me, I have no problem with private labor unions, but they're also going to be clearly in the bench, if you will, as ringers for big public union, and that's a little bit more challenging. So tell me about the organization you joined, what your capacity is. Give us a little bit of an infomercial here.
Yeah, for sure. Well, first, I want to say, I felt terrible. I wanted to be on the show earlier, and I'd love to say it was because I was sitting around doing nothing. But one of the things about starting a new job in around the time of a new administration, especially the Biden administration right now, in an organization that helps people with public sector union issues, is I've had my nose to the grindstone. So I'm really happy to be back. And I'm especially excited to talk about something that I really haven't been able to talk about publicly before, and that is public sector union issues. Unfortunately, they're prevalent, but that's exactly why we exist, is to help people. So as you mentioned before, I work for an organization called Americans for Fair Treatment, where I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships. And what we do is help educate people, specifically public sector employees, about their First Amendment rights. And that sounds like a big thing to bite off, but it's certainly not more than we can chew. And it's something that we're working on every single day, which is tremendously rewarding, and also a way that we feel we can make a difference in a lot of ways to a lot of people all across this country, but specifically focused in the northeastern United States, where a lot of this power is concentrated.
So what was the genesis of the organization? How long has it been with us? And who came together, if you will, to coalesce into what's clearly needed on the horizon right now is an honest perspective on big public labor?
Yeah, so Americans for Fair Treatment was founded in 2014 in response to what I think some folks accurately forecasted to be the growing power of public sector unions. And the real need for Americans for Fair Treatment, I think, became clear after the 2018 Janus versus AFSCME decision at the Supreme Court. For those of you who might not be aware, that Supreme Court case decided that, or rather clarified, that public sector employees cannot be compelled to pay money to a public sector union as a condition of employment. Now, that sounds pretty cut and dry. I think Justice Alito did a really fantastic job making that very clear. But one of the things that we've seen since that time is that, well, the devil's in the details. Supreme Court decisions need to be applied in the states. And a lot of folks have come to us seeking education and seeking help to make sure that their rights are protected, that their Janus rights are being respected. So what we have done and what we continue to do is provide education. We provide defense of people's rights by helping arrange legal help where that becomes appropriate. We help people opt out of their union. We help people leave the union and make sure that they aren't being taken advantage of when they try to leave and the union says, actually, we think we're going to hold on to you for a little while longer. We are there to step into that gap, make sure that people know their rights, and make sure that they're taking the steps to safely, securely disaffiliate from a union that they don't want and they don't need.
Right. Now, public labor unions, I believe, need to be differentiated from private labor unions. In my personal opinion, first of all, I don't really have a problem with private labor unions as long as, again, I'm a libertarian, so we don't believe in the use of force or coercion to make someone belong to a union and make someone pay dues. In private labor, coalescing, I believe, is really, in my personal opinion, a form of capitalism. I mean, raw materials in the production cycle, manufacturers of folks who derive or manufacture composites of raw materials have always had the right to collectivize, if you will, and the libertarians hate that term, but to organize to gain economies of scale, as had the finance function of capitalism, as manufacturers have been able to do for time immemorial. So I don't have a problem with individuals coalescing to gain economies of scale and to gain power in the marketplace. Of course, the difference being is that private labor unions, if in fact, and let's use the UAW as an example, if they quote unquote go overboard, if they force through their own power organizations to create artificially high wages, benefits, etc., then if the company does not adjust or find a safety valve, the company will cease to exist. The marketplace ultimately will render them non-competitive. And that's a significant function of the automobile manufacturers' failures of the last generation, and why government motors, as we call it now, and went into a new, if you will, into a new life under bankruptcy. And that's why, quite frankly, Chrysler's Fiat. And Ford, of course, in their own legendary way, managed to stave it off by literally auctioning, putting up for bid just about every asset the company had. But there's a safety valve there. What's the problem from your perspective, not only as a function of force and coercion, but the impact of public labor unions, on, well, government?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've hit the nose on the head, right? In that there is a difference between private sector unions and public sector unions. And I want to clarify, I think it's really important that any of your listeners know that the idea of coming together and doing something, yes, I'll say the word collectively, is not incompatible with the ideas of liberty, right? And I think you and I have talked about this before, but coming together and practicing voluntary association is how we build communities. It's how our families work. It's how civilization functions. And it's so, so important. But in the case of unions, public sector unions, there's a little bit of a power dynamic that starts to get out of control. Because as you said in the example of the auto industry, one of the other things that might happen is if a union is over negotiating with the employer, and really the union is there to negotiate against the employer, they would come in, and if they demanded too much, it may actually prevent the company from being profitable. It may cause loss of jobs. There's an economic toll that keeps these two forces butting heads in a way that's productive, because they both have to have each other's interests at heart. Mm-hmm. The problem when it comes to public sector unions is that they are reaching into taxpayer pockets, which is to say that there is a tremendous amount of money and there is the force of government backing up the ability to collect money, but also the folks who they are against at the bargaining table are the very people who they are helping fund to get elected, right? They're bargaining against government officials. There's a great line. It's the title of a book by a guy named Dan DeSalvo, and it's called Government Against Itself. And he talks about this dynamic. And it's so important to mention that that is where many of these problems come from, and oftentimes why you see things start to maybe get a little out of hand, as we've started to see with bubbling pensions and all of these different issues, is that unions in the public sector don't have that same very important butting of heads that makes collective bargaining a really powerful, functional system.
So what happens now? We've got Janus, and all you need to know about unions' fear of Janus was the incredible effort they mustered in terms of everything from political grandstanding to messaging to hard politicking during the time that even though this case was being held by the United States Supreme Court, allegedly in an apolitical environment. They predicted their own collapse in a sense as a way of rallying the troops, which ironically only spurred other groups on to fight them. What's been the consensus, if you will, of the after effects of Janus?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I was on the steps of the Supreme Court in 2018 as those oral arguments were happening, and if there's one thing that I can say, it's that both sides of this argument are very, very passionate. Mm-hmm. I think it's justifiable that public sector employees are in many ways worried about what might happen if their union loses power. Mm-hmm. And that's because my belief anyway is that these public sector employees don't often have the whole picture. Right. Now, I'm in the business, and AAFFT is in the business of providing education, right? We're not here to say that you shouldn't join a union. We're not here to say that the union is the right fit for you. What we're here to do is put education in people's hands and help folks move from a position of union dependence to union independence. And that's a really important distinction. And you can be part of a union and have independence in a way, at least if you're an informed consumer, if you're doing what is best for yourself and for your family. But unfortunately, there are so many myths and there's so much wrong information that is spread through everything from mandatory orientation sessions that unions preside over, or various handouts, or simply the culture that people have to deal with as they are part of a bargaining unit, where as folks want to resign their union, for example, they're facing tremendous pressure to stay in, to be part of that club. And as more folks stand up and decide, hey, yeah, you know what, I would like to exercise my rights, we try to stand in the gap and provide them with the information that they need to do that. So in terms of where we stand right now, I want to make sure that folks understand the battle right now is a battle over education. And I don't mean that in terms of public education. I mean, are the teachers being educated? Are police officers being educated? Are public sector employees knowledgeable about their rights, or are they being kept in the dark? And it's really important that we shine a light on what's going on and make sure that these folks have the information they need to make an educated decision that's going to be right for them and for their families and for our communities.
So let's dispel then some of the myths, if you will. And I'm sure this is probably what you're confronted with all the time. First of all, there is, and having experience now as a close spectator, attempts by unions to either decertify, change unions, change the landscape of their union. There is a tremendous amount of fear involved. There's this fear that somehow that you will end up without benefits, working slave wages, all of that. What do people have to be afraid of when they challenge their union?
For sure. Well, you know what? Let's dig right in on exactly what you just said. That is a big myth. People think if I leave the union, I will lose my benefits. But the benefits in your contract apply to everyone in your workplace. And that means sick time, vacation time, health insurance, dental, vision. All of these collectively bargained benefits remain the same whether you pay union dues or not. Your employer cannot sign a contract with you directly because they've agreed to only negotiate with the workplace union. But in return, the negotiated contract has to apply to everyone. So this arrangement is called exclusive representation. So the union gets full control over that bargaining unit. So all of the teachers in a district, for example, or all of the workers in a department in a government. So exclusive representation is protected in state laws and allows them to have that power. But the myth, again, if you leave your union, you'll lose your benefits, is absolutely a myth that needs to be dispelled.
What other fears do folks have?
Well, I think the first one that we see so often is the idea that people think that they have to belong to a union. And I want to tell you a story about a guy who I know in Pennsylvania named John Cabler. He is a liquor store clerk. So Pennsylvania has a state-controlled liquor stores, which we can get into another time. But as a result of it being state-controlled, he had to deal with an exclusive representation situation. So that the bargaining unit is comprised of all of the folks who work in these liquor stores. And during his first day, he shows up for orientation. He was tremendously excited. When I talked to him about this situation, he said he had been trying to get this job. He wanted to work in these liquor stores. It was something he was really looking forward to. And when he showed up for orientation, there was a union organizer there who told him, if you do not join this union, you will not be put on the schedule. If you do not pay the union, you will not have a job. And that's something that is absolutely not true. Union membership is and always has been optional for public employees. For many years, people were forced to pay their workplace union whether or not they joined. And this gets back to what the situation was in the Janus v. AFSCME case. So it used to be that you could pay fair share fees, so-called, or you could pay dues. And as a non-member, you would still be forced to pay these fees. But those fees were, many cases, 90% of the total dues that you would be paying anyway. So you're basically giving up your vote for 5%. Post-Janus, you do not have to pay a penny to a public sector union as a condition of employment. So now the difference is between pay full dues or pay nothing. And you do not have to belong to that union if you don't want to. Huge myth. Absolutely needs to go into the history books.
Absolutely. Because ultimately, there are, like any situation, a complex set of scenarios as to why folks are quote unquote upset about their union. But in a nation that is clearly divided along some fairly deep political lines, the move by people away from the union directly impacts the union's ability to politically contribute. And of course, I think it's fair to say that the contributions were pretty much going in one direction. Fair enough?
I'd actually say the most recent statistics that we have available show that roughly 97% of political money spent by, for example, teachers' unions goes to Democrats.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. And on top of that, and it's interesting because each state has its own finance laws. The difference is so stark and has so many ramifications unto itself. These big union contribution come from highly developed political machines that, because of this forced taxation, I'll call it a tax. I won't even call it a due. I'll call it a tax. Because of this tax, are able to mobilize in manner that really aren't immediately obvious to someone who isn't involved in politics on a day-to-day basis. And I'll use an example. In Rhode Island, for example, the laws state that in order for you, a political action committee, to donate to another political action committee in state, that political action committee has to be registered in the state of Rhode Island and have a banking relationship that is tied to a bank that has at some level business in Rhode Island. Now that sounds pretty innocuous, isn't it? But in order to comply with that, you have to have an entire machine dedicated to political reporting. So you've got to, let's just take Emily's List as an example, because I know this for a fact. Emily's List is a national organization geared largely to the left and donates to women candidates. Okay, great, no problem. That's their choice. But because of the overwhelming size and the resources they have, they're able to legally take donations and give donations in Rhode Island because they have boots on the ground dedicated towards the maintenance of the incredible political, if you will, end runs you have to make to keep up to date with election return and election donation reporting. Most smaller organizations, grassroots organizations, don't have that kind of clout or that kind of money. So ultimately, this is was a huge self-fulfilling prophecy, wasn't it?
Well, I mean, I think it comes back to the power dynamic that we were talking about before, right? Mm-hmm. If you're able to put a tremendous amount of money into politics and you're able to influence elections, unions are the largest ground game. Democratic shock troops is how it was recently described in the Wall Street Journal, right? In that you're able to put boots on the ground to advocate for these politicians and specific policies that, line their pockets at the end of the day when they're across the table from the very person they helped get elected. But political action generally extends beyond just elections, right? Of course, we're talking about getting someone elected to the presidency or getting someone elected to Congress, but it also has to do with the various issues and policies that are being advanced by these organizations. So one of the things that might be interesting to look at is, for example, the things that were discussed and voted on at the 2020-2021 National Education Association meeting, where they voted on very important education issues like the use of nuclear weapons and privatization of prisons and other such topics that have, quite frankly, nothing to do with their core job, which should be representing teachers. And the hope would be that there would be something in there about representing or at least being aware of students' needs, which is so important. And one other thing I want to say, and I apologize for going on a little bit here, but there's something that's so important that people understand is that we're talking about teachers' unions, but that is not necessarily reflective of teachers.
Right.
And this is so important, especially during the COVID era, where we have time and again seen news articles and news coverage that says something like the NEA says X, Y, or Z. And what you're not hearing from are the actual teachers on the ground who want nothing more than to get back to the classroom and teach and do what's right for these kids. And it's been such an empowering thing for me to be able to interact with these teachers and talk to them and hear their stories, as they are so excited for all of the opportunities to come and to offer their services in these communities, right? Many of them are true public servants, and they take that role seriously. Their voices have been co-opted by the union. So the next time you see in news coverage something that says, a teachers union says, just realize that that's not the whole story. There are a lot of people out there who have different opinions than their union. And that's something that we try to address. We, again, in providing that education, part of what we do is we actually offer a community. We offer membership in Americans for Fair Treatment, where teachers and other public employees, anyone employed in the public sector and formerly in the public sector, can come to us and access a community of folks who feel similarly and have that support. We know it's not easy to be the only teacher in a district standing up and saying, hey, this isn't for me, but we want to be there to catch them and make sure they know that they have the support on the other end.
Now, you had mentioned, and this is a critical point, you had talked about the inclusion, if you will, of teachers, non-union teachers, in receiving the same level of compensation. Is that true for benefits as well? Are you able to, if you're not a member of the union, participate in, let's just say, for example, you in a 403B program run by TIAA CREF, which is one of the power players, if you will, in that. How does that all work in terms of benefits?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, and it's going to depend on the collective bargaining agreement, right? So benefits in your contract apply to everyone in your workplace, right? So these are the types of things that I listed before: the sick time, the vacation time, health insurance, vision, dental. Those things are collectively bargained, so they would remain the same whether you pay union dues or not. So leaving the union should protect your benefits just the same. There are certain situations in which something like liability insurance, my sister-in-law, for example, is a special education teacher, and liability insurance is something that's really important in that profession. What the teachers union won't often tell you, however, is that you can get liability insurance elsewhere. And in fact, there are organizations, both national and state-based, that can offer you greater liability insurance, sometimes as much as twice as much liability insurance at a fraction of the cost. So it's really important that your teachers and other public sector employees are aware of their rights, are aware of that language. And if, quite frankly, if anyone listening had questions, I'd encourage you to reach out, give us a call, send me an email, connor@afft.org, and I'd be happy to put you in touch with someone who can go through the collective bargaining agreement, answer your questions, and get you set up. And heck, we do it for free. We're a nonprofit. We're doing this because we think it's important and it matters. So getting all of the information, again, providing that education is something we believe so firmly in that we decide to do it full time.
Do you ever find irony that on one hand, folks who are typically left of center are complaining about corporate greed and corporate welfare, which I'm as opposed to corporate welfare as anyone you'll ever meet. But at the same time, it's quite frankly, it's their union pension funds that are some of the biggest institutional investors on the planet, whether it be on a separate basis or, for example, say as part of something like CalPERS, where they've got the ability to move boards, control decisions. They've literally got front row access. Do you find irony in that?
You know, me and you have talked about marketing quite a bit, right? And oh man, if this isn't a marketing win for the unions, if you think about it though, unions do control, for example, teachers unions, for example, control the onboarding process. And teachers unions like the NEA, Pennsylvania State Education Association, where I live in Pennsylvania, will actually have like pre-union membership for students studying to become a teacher. And one of the things about that is that they're able to very clearly show, hey, here's what we think a teacher should be. And a key part of that is union membership. When it comes to the real irony is that there are so many teachers elsewhere who don't follow that model. They are very happy being independent. They find incredibly fulfilling work. And in fact, they find that some of the shackles of union membership are removed. And they're able to do their job better as educators. So one of the things that we do, and I'd encourage people to check out americansforfairtreatment.org, is we've actually compiled stories of these folks. We want to put this on display because we're aware that only one side of this story is being told. You should go and learn about how these other teachers are experiencing their life as educators, or other public employees are living their lives free from that union influence. There's a whole nother narrative out there, and it's really important that folks understand that it exists.
Because one of my other frustrations, and my wife's a teacher, full disclosure, she teaches in the dreaded private sector. If you were to go through literally every profession, from accounting to NFL player, there are folks out there who analyze talent and find ways for their own personal profit to place you in different positions. Headhunters, agents, call them what you will. But what's astonishing is that literally doesn't exist in the world of K to 12 teaching, because quite frankly, the contracts are so overwhelming, and movement from outside to outside districts is so treacherous that individual school systems find themselves unable really to compete for the best teachers. And as we all know, in a basic market condition where all of a sudden there's competition for your goods and services, well, I'm going to give you the easiest softball question of all time, Connor Drigotas. Who benefits most in that situation?
The consumer.
And the teacher. The teacher.
Yeah. Well, it's true, right? I mean, well, if you want better education and better results for students, you want the best teachers. And the way to get the best teachers is to make sure that there is a competition and incentive to be the best teacher. There's a great phrase that, I'm hoping to put out a video about this concept at some point in the near future, called the dance of the lemons. And that's where, due to these very complicated contracts, districts and schools are unable to fire bad teachers. So instead, these lemons are passed around from school to school, from district to district, landing in jobs, but unfortunately continuing to provide a lower standard of education for kids. And that is a terrible shame. It's not what we want in our education system.
Or in New York City, you've got situations, I think they were often referred to as rubber rooms, where teachers who were just incorrigible, just frankly incorrigible, just borderline functional, were placed in these rooms and paid salaries just simply because there was no avenue with which to rid yourself of them. I mean, you were with them for life. Yeah. You were married to them. Here's the central problem. I think everybody in a perfect world has this sort of Pollyannish view of their own school systems and the relationship between teachers, except for every couple of years when a contract comes up. And everybody has fallen victim to what I call the real estate agent syndrome. Connor, do you have a good school system? Yeah, it's great. It's fabulous. People are having tremendous success with the school system. Really? Who told you that? Well, my real estate agent. But we are seeing a fundamental failure. I would urge everyone, in their spare time, because people who watch this show tend to be wonks when they see it in replay or whatever, and just simply Google the Johns Hopkins University and Providence, Rhode Island school systems, and take an afternoon out or maybe an airplane flight to read the analysis that occurred about a year and a half ago. And it will either, if you're a sentient human being capable of emotion, it will probably reduce you to tears, because all kidding aside, it shows you what an utter, unrelenting, unrepentant disaster the Providence school system is. I mean, they talk about rodents sharing classrooms with students. They talk about mold in classrooms. And then they talk about the performance levels where you've got a single digit, less than 10% of students on standardized testing. And I know people can debate standardized testing, but we have to have a benchmark somewhere, right? Students at a single digit level performing at expectations, not above expectations, at expectations. And I, in the town I live in, someone was bragging about the fact that, 45% of the students, were in the top. They exceeded expectations or met them. Really? So that means 55% of the students in Cumberland, Rhode Island, where I live, all right, are performing below expectations for math in the year 2021 in a middle-class community. Man. So the danger is real, isn't it? I mean, this is not just some exercise in feudalistic serf mentality trying to subjugate teachers, is it?
I think we can all hope that at some point we'll look back in the history books and realize that, hey, we did everything we could and we moved the ball forward on doing what's best for students and what's best for teachers. And we put those interests ahead of everything else. That's exactly why Americans for Fair Treatment exists. It's why I spend my 9 to 5 and well into the evening, as I am right now, doing this. It's because I love it and because it's important. There's a lot on the line here, absolutely. And quite frankly, when it comes to your rights as a public employee, education is everything. Being knowledgeable. There are many bills being passed around state houses across the country simply asking that a piece of paper be put into onboarding paperwork saying, hey, just so you know, here are your Janus rights. You don't have to be a member of the union. In fact, you cannot be forced to pay a public sector union as a condition of employment. And those kind of bills, basic level transparency bills, are battlegrounds right now, because they're statements that public sector unions do not want in that onboarding paperwork. Right. If it's going to come down to education, we're going to do everything we can to arm our teachers and our public servants with all the education they need to exercise their rights if that's what they choose to do.
Right, and it speaks to the very basis of the problem itself, the notion that the access to said paperwork, the access to information, the right to know, if you will, about your own employment is being, if you will, roadblocked by the very people who benefit from the type of one-way contribution gravy train that exists between unions and democratic lawmakers. It sums up in its own unique way the difficulty and the problem and the challenges. And the notion that they would, on one hand, point to fair play and say, no, we're not guilty of that, while being very guilty of it, proves the fact that they can literally stare you right in the eye and just whatever it is you want to hear, they'll say. It's all about power, isn't it?
Power is a very good way to say it. And also, I'm hoping that if someone has listened this far and watched this far through the program, that, they would take me at my word. But at the same time, I don't think anyone necessarily, you don't have to take me at my word. I would encourage any public sector employee, teacher, or otherwise to ask their payroll department and ask their human resources department these basic questions. Hey, could I be fired if I chose to not join the union? Or do I have to pay union dues? Will I lose my benefits or my pension if I opt out, right? One of the questions that you brought up before. Ask those questions to the payroll or human resources department, and the answers you're going to get are the exact same, because those are your rights and you deserve to know about them.
So your organization, this is where we talk about shameless self-promotion. We've just got a couple minutes left. If you're joining us at the tail end of this, Connor Drigotas is with us. He is with the Americans for Fair Treatment. It is I'll call it a right-to-know organization. Your rights, you have a right to know them. And providing really a drama-free environment where you can be handed a list of exactly what you can expect should you decide on a personal level that union membership, doesn't work for you personally. And it could be for a number of reasons. It could be the personality of the local union. It could be the fact that politically you don't want to see your hard-earned money be directed almost with a degree of unanimity that's almost impossible to match to left-of-center political organizations. It could be, you could wake up one day and just not want to be part of it. It really doesn't matter. That's irrelevant. Your reasoning is irrelevant. All that matters are your rights. So let's lay it out. So an individual is frustrated because they feel they're being, running into that sort of brick wall of information. Maybe the administrator or maybe the system or the municipality is too small to have a true HR professional who understands the laws that they are held to and their legal responsibility to declare such information to you. It could be 100 reasons. Someone's frustrated. They Google it. They come to you. What are the services and how can folks reach out to you? For sure. Well, our website's americansforfairtreatment.org. But I'd say shoot me an email, Connor, CONNER, @AFFT.org, or give us a call. We're friendly folks, 833-969-3247. That's 833-969-FAIR. We're going to be there to help walk you through what exactly your rights are. We want to provide education, and we want to do it in a way that puts the ball in your court to make the decision that's going to be best for you, best for your family, best for your community, whatever is going to be best for you. Education is a key part of that. We can put the tools in your hand and hopefully provide that education. And if it does turn out that there's a serious issue or that your rights are not being respected, the other service, one of the other services that we offer is making sure that we help people defend their rights by
arranging legal help if that becomes necessary, and referring folks to legal help that is free, nonprofit, public interest law firms that can take care of these issues and make sure that your rights are protected 100% of the time.
Excellent. And this is all done on, if you wish, a highly confidential basis, I would assume.
Absolutely. Yeah. We are very sensitive to the folks that give us a call. We do not share anything without anyone's direct permission, for sure.
Yeah. And so it's an important point. You're not being forced by this side, at least Connor's side, to make a decision. Simply be informed as to what your rights are. It's probably not a shock to most that any employer, could be private, could be public, may not, be as forthcoming as they possibly should be on a moral level. That, they're not going to bleed information to you so that you can, make that informed decision. But at least make the phone call. Understand on a professional level where your rights are, where your responsibilities are, and ultimately those responsibilities are to yourself. So it's an outstanding contribution to personal liberty here, because I want to remind everybody that there's the choice word, right, Connor? Personal liberty is all about choice. And choice can be about virtually every aspect of your life. It's not just limited to bodily choice. It's not just limited to any one of a number of choices that one side of the aisle would present to you. It's all about personal choice at each level. So listen, thank you as always for joining us. Next time you're back, we want to continue this conversation, because I'd love to see the ongoing impact of Janus, particularly now that we're almost into a third stage, in the sense that Janus occurred. All of a sudden, there's this near media clampdown on the ramifications once the Sturm and Drang of Janus, the decision was passed. And now we're into a new stage where a variety of institutions are coming to terms with the concept of having to provide people with this information. And so this is a trend we need to stay on top of in the liberty community. And as candidates or advocates for the liberty community, we need to reach out to folks like Connor, because we need to understand the realities, not the urban myths, not the legends, not the sort of frauds that are often perpetrated and perpetuated on individuals. But if we are to be effective communicators of the opportunities that one is given through a life of liberty, self-determination, and choice, then we have to do our homework as well. How's the book going, by the way, Work for Liberty? Which, by the way, there's a link to on the homepage of the coalitionradionetwork.com where you can purchase said book. But how's that going before we say goodnight to you?
We are going strong. We've been receiving messages regularly that folks are getting jobs through this community, through our Discord community. And it's been tremendously rewarding. Actually, right before this call, I was just editing a resume for someone who reached out and said, "Hey, I'm applying for this job. I'm really excited about it. Can you take a look?" So we're almost at 500 members of the Work for Liberty Discord. And there are still new jobs in the liberty movement being posted every single day. Communications, legal, grassroots, policy, executive, administrative, tech, all over the place. If you're interested in working for liberty, there's a job out there for you.
Excellent. Connor Drigotas, ConnorDrigotas.com. A freaking offender here at the Coalition Radio Network. Again, his book is on Amazon. You can also find it linked right on the homepage at coalitionradionetwork.com. Again, Renaissance kind of guy, university professor, communications guru, and now advocate for personal freedom in the workplace. Congratulations on everything. It's great to see it going so well, and I can't wait to have you on again.
Looking forward to it, Pat. Thanks so much.
We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network. Well, at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, on the Mighty Mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. Like us, follow us, share us, help us rise above the white noise of the lazy conventional media. Support independent media. Thanks to Connor for joining us. Have a wonderful evening. We will be back tomorrow night with a wide range of guests, including we'll start to share here on this network something we broadcast on the Libertarian Party, LPTV, an evening with the candidates. Every night, every Friday night, I should say, we bring someone on board who is running for office somewhere in the nation, or we talk about the political theory of candidacies, best practices, all of that. That's at 9 o'clock Eastern tomorrow night. Have a wonderful evening, and thanks for joining us.